Hi, and welcome back to Rediscovering RC, my personal journey as I venture back into the world of RC and RC racing after an almost 20-year hiatus. I'm your host Julio, and welcome to part 2 of my Serpent X20 110 scale electric powered touring car build. If you saw part 1, then you know that we ended the build on bag 5, which is the center mounted spool and motor mount. And from that time to where this video picks up, about a week has passed. So, daily life got in the way, so I kind of had to wait till the following weekend to continue with the build. So, that being said, we will pick it up on bag 6, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I've started on bag 6, and just after the first step really is to create the upper links, the ones that go mounted onto the arms. Just some notes here. They call for a separation between the base of the ball stud and the loop here. On the front it should be 3 millimeters and on the rear 4 millimeters. One of the things that I do just to make it easier, because taking these inside measurements are always tough with the calipers, especially with small little distances like that. Once I got one calibrated, I measured the overall length, then basically used the overall length to adjust the other one. Got me in the ballpark. So I did the fronts first, which once I did it, it came out to 23.5 millimeters, on the outsides here. So naturally, because these are a millimeter longer, I went with a target of 24.5. Now, once I did that, I went ahead and measured the inside, because one of the things that I did, again, just cleaning, I sanded off here to get rid of the flashing around the outside of, basically this ball joint. So you always want to measure the inside, and sure enough, I measured it and I got them like super close. As a matter of fact, the overall length between all of them, probably because of the sanding, is about 200 of a millimeter on each side. But I did measure. I do have 3 millimeters in the front and 4 millimeters in the back. So now I'm going to be building up the anti-roll bars. So let's go. Okay, so bag 6 is done. We've got our sway bars installed, front and rear. The only thing that I would, or things that I would keep track of, or as far as build notes go, is that the little upper links, so when you go to connect them, there is basically one hole on one side that's a little bit larger than the other one, so it will make it a little easier for you to pop them onto the balls that are on the arms. The only other thing is that once you install the anti-roll bar, it is a little tough to pop them on. So actually what I would recommend is that you just not put the ball links on the suspension, even though that's like the first step that they tell you to put these links that go onto the suspension arms first. I would just go ahead and build the sway bars as per the instructions, then pop them on. It'll be a lot easier, and you can feed the entire thing through the assembly. Now do keep in mind when installing them that they do go below the dog bones, so front and rear. So that's just one little tech tip that I would have if you're building this first time. So we're done on the bag 7, which if I'm not mistaken is the servo assembly. Alrighty, so finished up with bag 7. So now the servo is installed. One thing that was a big oops on my part is that with all the extra parts that I got, I forgot to get the aluminum servo horn. So for now, I've got the plastic servo horn in place, but obviously I'm definitely not going to race this car with that. So yeah, I'll I guess next order that I need to place with Serpent, I will go ahead and get the aluminum servo horn for this car. Interestingly enough, the Tiken servo does come with an aluminum horn. However, the offset is just slightly off, and these cars are like totally engineered for a specific geometry for the steering and all that. So I mean, it's off by like about a millimeter. So I mean, I'm just gonna have to get the servo horn that was meant for this car. So anyways, on to bag 8. Alrighty, so true to my word, I went ahead and got the aluminum servo arm. It was pretty simple to basically replace. I didn't have to disassemble the car or anything. The servo arm is of the clamping design, so there is that little screw that clamps it at the bottom of the spline, but just for safe measure, as you can see here, I went ahead and inserted the main screw that goes into the spline itself. So with the horn installed, that was just one more thing done with the car. So let's continue. Okay, so finally finished with bag 8, which was really the installation of the battery holder, the center of the top deck, and the shock towers. Battery holder, pretty straightforward. I will say that the instructions are a little unclear in terms of, putting on the top deck, but I kind of figured it out. Since this is split in the front, I thought you had to like feed the front belt, but you actually have to feed both belts through this here, get it snuggled in place, and then you put in the 8 screws that hold it down. So that was really the only tricky part with that bag. I'm going to call it a night. It's kind of late here. I was hoping to get further along, but the next bag is going to be the shocks, and I would kind of rather have daylight for that. So I'll continue tomorrow. Really, all that's left with the car is to install the shocks and the body posts and and front bumper assembly, and I'm done. So in the home stretch here, but we'll finish up tomorrow. Okay, we are now on day 3 of the build, and I say day 3 because obviously I've spent 3 different afternoons working on this. Overall, I would say I've spent, I don't know, maybe 5-6 hours total, which granted for a kit like this is probably still a little bit long, but I've been stopping, setting up to film these little spots takes up some time, and overall here and there I've discovered that I missed a step in the instructions. It's one of those pitfalls of when you're not accustomed to building kits. So anyways, we're in the home stretch. All I have left to build is the basically the shocks and just install the body mounts, front bumper, and that's pretty much it aside from the electronics, which I don't have yet. So anyways, here we go. As you can see, the chassis is here, and let's get going. Okay, so I've pretty much built the shocks. I'm up to the step where I've put all the oil in it, filled it up pretty much up to the top, just letting the few bubbles that I have get up to the top. Reason being is that these are bladder shocks, so if you fill them like pretty much up to capacity, once you put the little bladder in, that'll essentially be the bleed process for you. You put the cap right on and that's it. One thing that I would suggest is, more than probably any other shocks you might build, lubricate the O-rings that go on the spring collar, because it's definitely going to be tough if you don't. The TLR shocks, the tolerance is just enough that it really doesn't matter. It makes it a little tough. Lubrication does help, but definitely with these, the tolerance is so tight that you pretty much have to. So I went and lubricated the O-rings on all of them, and even then I'm still having a little difficulty with 2 of them. I know they're not cross-threaded, but I'll have to play around with those, see if I can get those freed up a little bit. Anyways, I just popped off the shock tops, which are plastic pieces that go inside the hollow cap here. So because these came off of a tree, I'm just going to clean up the ends real quick where the flashing is, and then I'll be putting these together. And that's it. Okay, the shocks are built. Like I said, other than that little difficulty with getting the O-rings lubricated for the collars, they did free up quite a bit, so I didn't have to like take anything apart. The rest of the build is rather easy. It wasn't so tedious to get them to the required length of 11.2. It's just a couple of threads off of the bottom. So do remember to have a pair of shock pliers handy. In my case, TLRs, these are 3mm shafts, so if you have these will come in handy, but they are important. So now we just need to mount them on the car, and then we're off to bag 9, which is the final one with the body posts and the bumpers. Alright, so a couple of additional things that I wanted to talk about with regards to the shocks. So first off, as you can see here, I just wanted to make note, because obviously one of the things when you're putting shocks together is you really want to lubricate the O-rings, or the X-rings in this case, when you're building them. And in my case, I went ahead and I used the 110% Racing's RC Sweat. I've kind of used this ever since my 22X4 build, and I went ahead and used it in my daughter's SR as well. I really like it. It's kind of like that goopy stuff. I mean, if you've used the Associated, the shock slime, TLR has a similar product. Same kind of thing. It just helps lubricate those O-rings, and really helps so that you don't get any leakage after the build. I really like this product. I'll probably use it until I finish it off. The other one that I'm kind of interested in using is TDK Repairs, shock lubrication, which is supposed to be environmentally friendly and non-toxic. So that will be another alternative for me to try in the future. So one of the things that I noticed in the manual is that for the shocks themselves, the spacers, it has actually 6 spacers in the kit as opposed to 8. And the reason is, as you can see from the build manual here, when you get to step 20,
In step 20.1, you can see they use spacers on the on the top and the bottom for the rear of the chassis. But then when you get to step 20.2, which is the front of the chassis, you're only putting the spacer on the top. Now, this presented a problem when I went to install it, because basically, the grub screw that goes into the arms, they're all, 12 millimeters long. And the problem that I found when trying to, screw it in was that I really couldn't, this grub screw was forcing my my driver out of the socket hole for the ball joint. So since I had extra spacers, I went ahead and I added, the spacer. And if you look at the images that are available on the Serpent website, you can see that it shows pictures of the front without that spacer installed. But when you look at it, the grub screw is about a millimeter in from the top of the ball joint. Now this is interesting because the grub screw definitely bottoms out when you're screwing it in, and there was no way that I could put it in. So what I ended up doing is, since I had extra spacers, is that I just put spacers on the bottom, just like all the other shocks, the rear shocks on the car, and it seems okay. So I kind of wondered about this, and I even wrote Serpent about this, wondering if it was either running change in the car, or one or two things will either happen. They either provide spacers, 2 more spacers so you can put in the bottom of the front shocks in the kit, or shorter grub screws so that it doesn't bottom out when you try to screw them into the grub screw. So I still haven't gotten a reply from them yet. But one of the things that I recently saw while watching Felix Law's video that he put early this year with Yugo Nagashima over at the ETS when they went early this year, I noticed in the video that Yugo does have spacers. If you can see they're circled in red, he did have spacers installed in the front as well. So I guess it's okay to run the spacers up front, but I would definitely love to hear Serpent's take on this if they reply to my email. So anyways, with the shocks built, let's move on to what's basically the final part of the build.
Well, here we are. We are done with the build. Overall, it was pretty, again, it had its few little things back and forth, but pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and I'm kind of amazed at so much technology in this little package. So the only things of note for bag 9 is that there's a couple of braces underneath here on the bumper that are plastic. It's funny, it seems to be a revision from the manual that it looks like they were aluminum standoffs and they changed them to plastic ones. You may want to pre-thread those, and you definitely will need pliers once you get the screws to start going in there. They're pretty tough. Likewise, for the rear body posts, I would recommend the same. It's keyed. It's actually got 2 holes here. One of them is just a keyed piece of plastic. The other one is where the screw goes in. I would recommend for the rear body posts that you go ahead and pre-tap those as well. Other than that, for bag 9, there's really nothing else. Everything else was put together. The only other thing of note is that there are a lot of people that are putting like a brace up here, in case of front impacts. This tends to bend back, so a lot of people are coming out with 3D printed parts that kind of go either up against the shock tower or the aluminum brace for the differential here in the front. Just something to help absorb that impact. You do have the foam, but as you can see, this bends back some. So this probably, with the body post moving and all that, is probably going to damage your post and possibly even rip the the front of the chassis off. So definitely something that you might want to look into. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future Serpent does come out with some kind of solution for that. And that's basically what I've seen from the 3D printed pieces. It uses these 2 screws, kind of goes in the front here, and then braces in back here just above the sway bar. So anyways, that's all for my notes. So I'll be putting up together a summary episode with all of these notes. So I hope you look out for it.
Well, that's it for the build. And to be honest, I don't think I need a summary episode to sum up everything that I wanted to say. Overall, if I wanted to classify this build, I would say that it was not a complex build, but a precision build, in the sense of, all the fit and finish things, all of the, the sanding and the fine tuning, all the details, basically. And really the only problem that I had was, with the, those front end pieces, the axle and the, the out drives, which in the grand scheme of things is nothing really, crazy. In particular, if I had to rule out one of the two, it would definitely be the axles. It was just really the out drives and the ability for the dog bones to go in there. So, really, one of the things that I do want to point out from episode 1 in the comments, somebody very astutely pointed out that I kind of had a mistake there in specifically in the the toe links in the back. They said, hey, you've got that mount a little bit too far forward. Your links aren't straight. So it was, first of all, thank you very much for the feedback. I would have never realized that, but sure enough, if basically it bolts onto the chassis as is, but it's supposed to extend a little bit out because that's where the dog bones underneath, the ones that stabilize the chassis, that's where that's supposed to install when you elect to install that. So again, I mean, sharp eyes there to catch that detail, and I do appreciate it very much. At the same time, I mean, I was wondering, it is kind of like complicated in the manual when you see it. And I started looking at images in the Serpent website. And sure enough, I came across another one where they show the rear end of the car. But in this case, that ball mount isn't, extended out a little bit. So I don't know if it's maybe an option that you can choose to, run the, those toe links a little bit forward if you wish. Obviously you wouldn't be able to run that little wishbone brace underneath if you did that, but kind of got me thinking that whether that's an option or not. And then again, I refer back to the ETS video that Felix Law put together, and on Hugo's car, sure enough, rather than mounting onto that the ball link brace, he's actually got the toe links installed onto the bulkhead in the rear. He's got it screwed in from the bottom, as you can see here in the picture where I circled it, and it has a nut to keep it in place there. So I mean, that's just a testament to, the flexibility, the out-of-the-box thinking that these people are doing. I mean, Serpent may not have intended to design it this way, but it's certainly interesting that, racers are, going to these extremes just to try to get that little extra bit of performance, in this case on carpet, where they ran this round of the ETS series. So that's really what intrigues me about this car. And what intrigued me about Serpent products in general and returning back to them after so many years is that, it all started with the 4X. I actually purchased 4X Pro when I first started getting in and decided that I wanted to use Serpent. And when I saw that, the X20 was announced and was really starting to become the focus of their race team, I made the tough decision, even though I really liked the concept, the out-of-box thinking of the 4X, I wanted to go with where the development and really the support was going to be. So overall, like I said, I mean, I really enjoyed the build. I can't wait to get this thing out on the track. Obviously, I still got to finish getting the electronics and all, but I'm looking forward to giving you guys a race report once I'm able to get it out onto the track. So anyways, that concludes my build notes related to the Serpent X20 110 scale electric powered touring car. Let me know what you think. Do you have one? Have you been looking at this car? If you're thinking about getting into that class, let me know in the comments below. I'll really appreciate any and all feedback you guys can give me. Again, if you like the content that I'm delivering, please do me a favor and subscribe. I mean, any and all feedback, the comments, the subscribes really do a world of good to help me towards helping me deliver the kind of content that you guys want to see. So anyways, that'll do it for today. I'm your host Julio, and until next time, take care.